Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today we're going to do what they said couldn't be done. We are going to install Unraid on a Dell R710 server with a PERC 6i controller. Now supposedly, reading the literature on Unraid, this can't be done. It won't work properly. It won't see the drives. But we shall see, because I have a method to my madness. So it's going to be a long video, pretty detailed, lots of information in it. So it's going to be a little lengthy, but you've dealt with those that I've put out before that are nearly an hour long. So get a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey, or go roll one and smoke it, and kick back and relax. And we're going to go over Unraid, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and ultimately what my final decision was concerning Unraid. And the first thing we need to do is to power on the system and get into the PERC controller, the 6i PERC controller. Now what I've done is I've got 5 1 terabyte drives in here, a mix of Western Digital and Hitachi and a bunch of other drives. So what we need to do is go into the configuration utility and set these all up as standalone drives. I've already done that with the 2 1 terabyte drives that are in there, but I got a couple of Western Digital Blacks and a Hitachi in there. I want to set them up as well, and then we'll boot into Unraid and see if it even recognizes the drives. Yeah, I don't see it telling me I need to. There we go. Alright, so there's my 2 virtual disks, but I need to add 2 or 3 more. So we do F2, we'll create a new virtual drive, and here's the other drives I put in there. So we'll do them one at a time. Let's see. So virtual device or virtual disk. This will be 3. Just set it up as a drive. Okay. Back up here again, another one. Choose this one. VD4, right? Yeah, VD4. Yeah, I know. VD. Good choice for a hard drive, right? Alright, F2. Create a new virtual disk. Select that one, give it a name. We'll call that VD. Okay. And that should be all there is to it. And now I can escape. I need to send Control-Alt-Delete to reboot it. As we see the BIOS screen and the F11, we need to press F11. That way I can make sure it boots off the USB key. And keep in mind, I've never done this before, so I'm going to be doing it on the fly with you as we go through the website and get an array created, and then I'll try to figure out the rest of it on my own. Alright, so F11. Now, while we're waiting for this to boot up, I'm going to share with you, I did my research, and I went out both under FreeNAS and under Unraid and wondered if Unraid and FreeNAS were going to see the drives as standalone drives under this PERC 6i controller. Now, according to everything out there on the internet, all the articles I read, there is no documentation on this controller for Unraid or for FreeNAS. They don't even mention it. Everybody said no, it's not going to work, but I booted it a minute ago with 2 drives in it. Unraid saw the drives, so I don't know why people are saying, hey, it won't work. It worked for me. And it shows me it's at 5.27. So, let's bring up the GUI. Alright, there it is. Now, it's a little disconcerting as it doesn't show any of the disks are assigned. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So What I want to do now is I'm going to follow LimeTech's getting started. They showed me how to boot up. Alright, so now that we've booted, we're ready to set up our first array. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes. Okay. Pick the largest storage device available to act as your Parity device. For this reason, it's highly recommended to purchase the largest additional Parity device. The future expansions are unlimited. So, if I pick a 1 terabyte, I guess what they're saying to this is, if I pick a 1 terabyte drive as my Parity device, I cannot assign a data disk that is larger than that Parity device. It's highly recommended. So if I were to at some point later upgrade all these to 4 terabyte drives, which I can't do on this controller anyway, the most I can do is 3 terabyte, then I would want to pick a 4 terabyte drive in the beginning before I set up my array, even though they're going to be smaller drive spaces, or I would not be able to extend the array. Interesting. I'm going to set the last drive as my Parity drive, and then I'll set the other disks. As you can see, I'm just choosing each disk. So it should give me 4. Well, how much storage should it give me? Let's see, normal, let's see. I don't have any cache drives. Okay, this is showing me my flash drive. Okay, so I've done that. Alright, once you have all your devices assigned, you can click the Start button under Array Operations. This will mount your devices and start the array. New devices added to disk or cache device slots will appear unformatted and will be unusable until you format them. UNRAID 6 defaults using XFS file system for all devices, but if you define a cache pool, butter file system, okay. I'm going to choose BTRFS. I didn't know I had that available under here, so I want to click here and start the array, I guess, right? Configuration valid. Start will record all disk information, bring the array online, start Parity sync. The array will be immediately available but unprotected. Okay, so click on Start. Okay. I see disk activity. I guess that's a good thing. So it tells me it's going to take 2 hours and 45 minutes to do the Parity on this drive. Well, I don't know that I'm going to be able to choose X or ButterFS because I don't have a cache drive. And it said right there clearly, if you don't select a cache drive, it chooses XFS. So I'm going to go ahead and format. The other thing I want to see is if it can read the smart. And I also don't want it to spin down these drives automatically either. That's another thing about Unraid. I'll have to get in here and play around with it. Let's see. Everything looks good. It sees all my memory, 24 gig. It sees all my CPUs. It sees my 4 network cards. They worked right out of the box. No errors. No problems. Alright, so we'll let this run. It looks like we've been successful though, which is something that according to everything I read on websites said wasn't going to be possible. But as you can see here, after I made my Unraid USB key, put the drives in, I'm able to use them. So we shall see. So we'll let this run and we'll come back once the array is created and see if we can figure this out. Alright, so now we're going to go through and we're going to, while the array is building, you can see here that has successfully formatted all the drives. I still don't understand whether, because if you come down here, it's showing the total size is only 1 terabyte. I don't understand why it's only 1 terabyte. But we'll come back to that after it's done doing Parity, because I thought it was going to combine the size of all the drives, so I'm a little confused, and that's never a good sign. When I don't understand a piece of software when I initially use it, that's usually not a good sign. But we're going to come through here, we're going to continue on. I need to set a root password, so I'm going to do that. Let me give it a password. Click on change. All right. All right. Never. So that let me in. So let's go over here to settings. I want to make sure our date and time are set correctly. NTP, yes. Okay, we come back here to identification. That's the name of the server. We can leave that. Let's see, network settings. Okay, enable bonding, no. I am going to enable bridging, yes, because I want to be able to use it as a virtual machine. So that was one of the things you want to keep. You want to keep it. Okay, I'm going to put port down. I'm not going to use Ethernet 0. I'm sorry, I'm not going to use Ethernet 1. I'm not going to use Ethernet 2 or Ethernet 3, so I'm going to put all of these ports down. I'm only going to use one of the available NIC interfaces. There. And you have to enable bridging here in order to use the virtual machines on here. So I've done that now. Let's see. Let's go to disk settings real quick. Enable auto start. Okay. Default spin down delay never. Enable spin up groups no. Master boot record 4K aligned. Partition 1 to sit. I'm going to change these. Let's apply. I chose the dark theme. I like the dark theme better. I just think it looks cooler. Just a matter of now letting the Parity run, and that's going to take a few hours, I'm sure. So go look here at plugins. Go look at Docker. There's no Docker. Go look at VMs. There's no VMs, but I can create them. Oh, I like it. Ooh, I like that it's got templates. That's kind of cool. I like that idea. Let's go to tools. So I was wrong. We have a total drive storage of 4 terabytes. It tells you right here if I would have just read the screen. And you can't see my mouse, but it's down where it says down at the bottom. Total array of 5 devices right there. There, now you see my mouse. You can see how many reads, how many writes, how many errors. Looks like I'm getting some errors on this this disk right here. I don't know why, but it says I am. And it shows me what my actual size is. So I've got 4 terabytes of storage. 26.7 gig is used. 3.97 terabytes are free. So again, we'll let the Parity finish running on here, because as you can see, it's not done yet. So we'll let that finish. So it's got another 2 hours and 48 minutes. So we'll leave it alone and let it run. I just wanted to show you that I was able to find out where my total storage was. I just had to stop and read. Alright, so while the Parity drive is building, let's go ahead and copy some data to this array. I've chosen some movie files, some rather large ones. And right up here you can see I'm connected to my Unraid NAS. I've just created a shared folder called test, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste some files that I told my favorite alien files. I'm going to copy it there, and we'll see how it does. But as you can see, the write speeds are about half of what I should normally expect to see while the Parity is building on those drives. Alright, we're going to try this one more time. One thing I forgot to do is I have set OBS and Premiere to run off of a network share on my Xpenology NAS, and I needed to set OBS to record to a local hard drive instead of over the network, because it's going to throw off my bandwidth, my transfer speed settings. So we'll see if we can do that drive or do that copy again. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose paste, and you can see the drive speeds are starting out about 50 megabits per second, or megabytes per second. Not my normal 99 to 100 that I see, but over time we'll tell if this speed goes up or goes down. So we're not going to sit here watching it for the entire time. Well, maybe we can. Why not? 2 minutes and 15 seconds. I'm going to let this run. I'm going to pause the video, and then we'll come back when we get toward the end of the file transfer session. Hello, we're back, and we're coming up on the final bit of copy, and for whatever reason, it's our transfer speed has gotten even worse. Of course, it did that when I started recording this video, but again, I'm recording to a local drive, not to the network, so this should not be impacting network performance at all. It did this before as well when I was recording to the Xpenology NAS. Even after I stopped recording, the speed stayed down about 15 to 20 megabytes per second. So I don't know what it is this last bit of copying. One thing you need to know about UNRAID as well is when you're copying to a drive array, it's not a traditional RAID array. It's only copying this data to one drive. It fills drives and then moves on and writes them to another drive. So some call that a benefit or an advantage that you don't. It's not like a RAID array where you can't pull the drives out and read them in another machine. But just so you know, it doesn't write to multiple drives in that RAID array at the same time. It just writes to one drive, and then the next time you do a copy, it decides what drive it should, what least filled drive it should copy it to. That's how UNRAID works. So as you can see, even though the RAID is rebuilding, if I bring that up, you can see it's got, let's see, how long does it have? It's about 82%. It has that array built, or the Parity drive built. So we'll come back and we'll do another test after Parity has finished on that drive. So looking at the dashboard now, you'll see our Parity disk is now in the green. If I get my cursor to appear, it is. So what I want to do now is copy. Now keep in mind, this is a bare metal install. This is on my Dell R710 server. So you see we've got the 16 virtual CPUs, we get 24 gig of RAM, we'll get the 4 network cards. I'm only using one of them, none of them are bound together. I have some shares that it created out here, app data, domains, ISO, system, and then of course the one I did, which is called test. That was painless. I just went out and created a share, I called it, gave it a name of test, just so I can move some data back and forth and test how the write speeds are on bare metal. And keep in mind, I was getting 100 megabytes per second write speeds when this was running Windows. So what I want to do is see what kind of write speeds I'm getting with UNRAID. Now that Windows, the write speeds I was getting was in a drive pool, a Windows drive pool. This is running LimeTech's version of RAID, where they have one Parity drive and then just 4 data drives. So I have a total of 5 excuse me, 1 terabyte drives in there. It took a little over 4 hours to build the Parity, and you can see even on one of these drives I have some errors on them. It is not passing the smart information either. You can see that it's not sending the temperature information. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back up File Explorer, and we'll bring it up over here. bring up File Explorer. I'm going to delete these test files off of that server, and we're going to redo them. I wonder if I still have them in the queue. Yep, here we go. So again, I have set up OBS to write to my local hard drive and not to the network in any way, shape, or form, I believe. Yes, I am writing that to my local drive. So you can see we still have these. I consider these abysmal write speeds. 50 to 60 megabytes per second is slow compared to Windows write speeds on this same machine. And I'm sure there's some, I don't know if it's the limit of the file system. The UNRAID file system is just not speedy at writes like Exponology is. You know, we typically get 100 megabits per second or megabytes per second on Exponology or Exponology NAS without any problems at all. They have a really well-tuned SMB kernel in Exponology. That's how we get those really good write speeds. But as you can see on this Dell with running UNRAID, we're not getting that great of a write speed. We'll let this finish out while I talk. Some other things I want to talk about. The Parity build rate on this was about 43.6 megabytes per second building Parity, and it took well over 4 hours to build the Parity on it. Another thing I see on here that I don't like is I don't see a lot of interoperability with Active Directory. I don't see an Active Directory connector in there. I'm sure I just have to dig a little deeper, but these are just my preliminary thoughts. I can tell you just from this initial install and data transfer, this will not be left on this machine for long. This Dell will be going back to being a Windows server. Alright, so let's stop a second and think about something. You know, I'm putting UNRAID on this Dell server because I have had several people ask me, hey, how about UNRAID? How about FreeNAS? Well, FreeNAS, you know how I feel about FreeNAS. FreeNAS I can do in a virtual machine. I know FreeNAS will run on this Dell. I'm not even slightly concerned with putting FreeNAS on this Dell. I'll run FreeNAS in a virtual machine and show you how it works there, because it's going to work just as well in a virtual machine for me for what I need to do, which is show you how it works. And then you can install it on physical hardware. But I went for a lie down. This is a Sunday afternoon. I need a little nap, just put my head together, and I'm like, you know, I've spent the last 2 or 3 days doing research, getting ready to put UNRAID on this Dell server, when all I really should have done was created a virtual machine using VirtualBox on my desktop PC here. I could have done the same thing. Why I didn't think of that? I got tied into wanting to put it onto live hardware or into bare metal, just to show you, just proof of concept. I love it when I run across articles. I do all this research is great. I do all this research about UNRAID and about FreeNAS. Oh no, you can't install it on a Dell with a PERC 6i control. You got to flash the Dell PERC 6. It won't pass through the disk, and the FreeNAS and UNRAID won't see the drives. They did. They saw them fine. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't tried it myself. So you can't always take what you hear from other people on the internet for gospel. It just could simply mean someone hasn't had success with it because they don't know one little thing that you know. For example, I know you have to go in and treat each drive as a virtual drive under the controller, the PERC controller, and then usually anything will see it, including Exponology. I tried to load onto this Dell server. The problem with Exponology was it didn't like the NIC cards that were in it. So I really don't on this Dell server, really the only storage that needs to be on there is storage for the virtual machines that I'm going to run under Windows Server 2016. Now, one of the things I did do is I saved my 2016 installation. I have the 2 mirrored drives that was on. So I think what we're going to do here is we're going to stop, and we're going to go back to Windows Server 2016 on this Unraid server for now. And I'll fire up another virtual Unraid server so we can test some of the things like virtualization and that kind of thing. The real thing that I was trying to wrap my head around with Unraid was how it handled drive arrays. And, you know, when you get to thinking about it, you don't want your virtual machines running on a drive array. You don't want the VHDs or the VDIs or the VHDXs, the actual image of the hard drive, on a slow RAID or even an array with Parity drives, because half of the time being writing that drive back to that array is going to be consumed by, you know, generating Parity, so it's going to slow the virtual machine down. So this combination of Unraid with a Parity drive, and it just really doesn't make sense. You got to plan this ahead. So in Unraid, I should have my own volume set aside for virtual disks that is not part of the array, because, you know, you get the write penalty on RAID. The only difference between Unraid and a regular RAID is regular RAID spreads the Parity across all the drives in the array. Unraid puts all the Parity on one drive. That could be a bad thing. That could be a really bad thing. This is why I keep going back to Exponology or Synology and their hybrid RAID, because they do a little dance like Unraid does, but they don't, for whatever reason, their kernel, their code is written so well that they don't have that write speed hit that you see in other RAID 5 arrays. And I'm just not going to tolerate that write speed hit, especially not with virtual machines. So we're going to stop for now. You've seen what we did. We got it up and running on the Dell. Now let's document what it's going to take for me to go back to Windows Server 2016 on there, and I'm going to take you with me. And then and you know why now. Mainly it's drive speed. And then what we'll probably do, we're going to create a couple of, not in this video, but I'll create separate videos on Unraid and FreeNAS and a virtual machine. See which one I like best. Then I have that beige box over there that's running VMware ESXi that I never use. I am a Windows virtualization guy, or I have Oracle VM box on my workstation here. That's really all I need. I don't deal with ESXi, I don't deal with VMware, I don't do a whole lot of videos on it, so I'm going to sacrifice that. It's that AMD quad core with 16 gig of RAM. I'm going to get another IC dock drive bay, a 4 drive bay or a 5 drive bay, and we're going to create a FreeNAS server out of that. So that's coming up. So I'll be taking out the 2 far drives on the right. Actually, I'll be taking all the drives out and replacing the 2 far drives on the left, I'm sorry, with the ones that are down on the floor, my 2 140 gig SAS drives, because those are the boot drives that Windows is already installed on. So here we go. Let me take you with me. I have to take you over to Internet Explorer for this one because it is a Java-based whatchamacallit. So let's we need to log in and boot this machine up and go in and redo the iDRAC configuration so that it will boot properly. So let me refresh that. I'm going to go ahead and launch a virtual console here. That's what I love. This is why I love real servers. They do make these boards that you can put into a regular machine and remotely power them on and have remote access to them, but by the time you buy a card to go in a standard PC, you could have bought a used server like I did. Now hopefully I'll get an error on this RAID controller. Yes. So I'm going to do C to load the configuration utility. Entering it will result in drive configuration. Yes. I think we'll be okay. Yeah. Let's see. F2. Foreign config. Import. Hey, it sees them. Yay. Good. So all I did was an import on these drives, and it magically found them. See if it still sees the 2 physical disks in there too. Okay. It does. Alright, so let me escape. Now it wants Control-Alt-Delete to reboot. Okay, we're booting into Windows, so we'll probably be good here in a minute. You see, folks, I try new stuff, and ultimately I just come back to Windows. And because I just do, because it works. Not that I don't believe what people tell me, but I have to experience, you know, these other operating systems for myself, and I knew after a few minutes at Unraid and I were not going to be a good fit. Doesn't mean it's not a good operating system. Doesn't mean it isn't perfectly capable. And I understand why a lot of people use these free alternatives, because Microsoft software is very expensive. You won't get any argument out of me there. For what I do, I find it's worth every single penny I have to pay Microsoft every year to renew my agreement with them. And the reason is because it just freaking works. I don't have to tweak. Well, for the most part. I'm not saying it's perfect. Nothing is. And I am getting into Linux more and more every day. In fact, we're going to be building some Linux servers on these Hyper-V servers and doing some really neat stuff with them. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to that Dell, and I'm going to physically install those hard drives, and then we'll come back and power it back on and create our virtual drive so that we have something for Windows to create a drive pool out of. The UPS and the new battery are still doing just fine. I have not had a single breaker trip. The air conditioner is now on its own circuit, and all the stuff in the server closet is on its own circuit, and the world is once more a happy place to live in, because I don't have to live in fear of that breaker tripping. And yesterday we had a mighty thunderstorm come through here. Some high winds and some heavy rain, which thank God, because we needed some rain. We probably got a couple inches of rain yesterday. And we had little glitches in the power, but it didn't blink. I have UPSs on everything now. I have it on all my PCs, everything but my aquariums. I don't put them on my TVs. And let's see, we need to C, because we want to load the configuration utility. So I'm going to hit C, and it's going to give us that warning again. Or not. Okay, So we're going to go up to the main controller here, and we're going to hit F2, and then I'm going to foreign config. Oh, wait a minute, let's import it. You know what? Yes, it should keep my disk group 0. Yes, it did. Now it kept all my virtual disks. So that should be called VD1. Yeah, it's kept them all. So now I can go out there and import them. Let's see, yeah, 931 optimal. 931. Alright, so what ended up happening was I went back out to the Dell the PERC controller, and I reinitialized all those 1 terabyte hard drives. You can see them here now. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So now if I come down to storage pool, you'll see they're now in a primordial or physical disk, and there's a primordial array available, or primordial disks available. So what I want to do is I want to create a new drive pool, if it'll let me. Okay, so new storage pool. Next, and we're going to call this VHD pool, virtual hard drive pool. Click on next. We're going to select all 4 of those disks, and the allocation will be automatic. So total capacity will be 3.64 terabytes. So we'll go ahead and create that now. And what that basically does is creates a raw drive to present to the storage manager. And then what we can do is go down here and create a new virtual disk. Tell it OK. Next, and we're going to call this VHD pool. We can do tiered storage, but we're not going to do that. We don't have it. These are going to be, we have 3 choices. We could do a simple, data is striped across all drives. We could do a mirror, where data is striped across physical disks, or we could do a parity. So I'm going to do a mirror. We're going to do fixed provisioning. So it uses all of the available size. And then we're going to create it. So it'll give us basically a 1.8 terabyte usable drive. And now we need to create a volume that is presentable to the system. So we'll pick that pool, 1.8 terabyte, 1.8 terabyte. I'm going to do drive letter P just to make things easy, because that's where the old Hyper-V had their information stored. Now, I could do REFS, and I think I'm going to. I don't think there's any issue with doing REFS, and we'll call this VHD pool. Now, REFS is supposedly Windows self-healing file system, so that'll help keep all of our volumes in good standing. So let's see here now. We should have 2 disks, drive P and drive C. Yes, we do. Alright, so now if we go back out to the File Explorer, we should now see the P drive. There it is. Okay. Now we need to go into Hyper-V, and I'm going to have to delete all of these machines because they don't exist anymore. But I need to make sure what did we call this? Virtual machines. Okay, new folder. Virtual machines. And then a new folder under there called virtual hard drives. And we'll select that as our folder for the machine hard drives, and then this one for the virtual machines. Yes, select folder. Okay. Now, what I need to do is delete all of these that don't exist anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we'll restore these later in one of our lab videos. Alright, good, good, good. Okay, so we should be good to go. Let's just verify one more time that that drive is still available. The pool has been created. Yes. Alright, so here we are. We're at the end. I got some thoughts on Unraid. I mainly did this Unraid video. I don't know why I didn't think of it before. I should just put it in a virtual machine, but when I ran across the article, I've been doing some research on Unraid and on FreeNAS and on Exponology, because ultimately I wanted to put Exponology on this Dell server, but Exponology won't work on that server with those NIC cards that are in there, so I would have to replace them. I didn't want to go through with that. What I wanted to do was see how the virtualization under Unraid and how that performed, and under FreeNAS. And then I come to find out FreeNAS Corral was canceled. They've now released FreeNAS 9 as FreeNAS 11 with some modifications to the interface. That's fine. We're going to build a FreeNAS box on that beige box as I discussed. But I just wanted to go over my final thoughts on Unraid. What doesn't work is Smart, the pass-through. So you have to keep that in mind. You're going to lose that ability unless you change out the controller, the RAID controller on that Dell, and I wasn't willing to do it. And in hindsight, like I said, I probably should have put it on a virtual machine just to play with it, but I wanted to see if it could be done. The other thing I was thinking of, ooh, it would be great if I could, because what I want to do is put the virtualization on the Exponology box I have, but it's only an i3 processor, and it's really not going to be a good, fair judge of the speed of virtualization on Exponology. So I'll wait until that comes out of beta, and then I'll do a video on running virtual machines under Exponology, because that little i3 I have is only a, a quad core processor, and it's only got 8 gig of RAM, so I don't want to overtax it. But that was my thought. That's why I wanted to try Unraid and FreeNAS. I wanted to see how the virtualization would do on a big power happy box. But I remembered I have that AMD beige box in there, and that is a quad core processor, 16 gig RAM. That should be able to handle FreeNAS and any virtual machines. I'm not quite sure how mature the virtualization is on the Unraid and on the FreeNAS setups. I don't know how stable their virtualization is. Maybe somebody else could tell me. Now, one thing that really, if you remember way back from one of my first videos on RAID arrays, I told you why I don't like them. Basically, slow write speeds, and when you put drives on a RAID array like a typical RAID 5 array, you always risk losing another drive when you go through the rebuild process. Plus, I don't like the slow write speeds. And unfortunately, that was one of the things I saw on Unraid, is you saw the abysmal write speeds, and I just can't live with bad write speeds. It's not that often. Well, actually for me it is that often that I write to the hard drives. I'm constantly copying videos on there. I'm constantly editing data. I'm constantly updating videos and music. And write speeds are very important to me. If it were a database server, that kind of thing, I could live with the write hit, but I'm not willing to live with it. That's why I went with Exponology. So just be aware that unless there's some tweaking I need to do, and that's another valid point, I don't want to have to tweak these operating systems. When I install Windows on that R710 server, even Windows Server 2016, the drivers are there, SMB's been tweaked, it runs fast, it works well with the NIC cards. I don't have to worry about going back and tweaking little shit. I'm too old for the tweaking. You young whippersnappers out there can tweak these operating systems. I want them to work. And I thought for Unraid being a paid, you have to pay for Unraid after 28 or 29 days. You have to pay at least, what is it? I think it's $59, $89, and $129. You can look up the prices on Unraid. And I thought, well, it should be optimized out of the box. I know they can't optimize it for every hardware bare metal install you do, but it should be, the SMB should be optimized. That's something Synology got right. The RAID configuration, they kind of play. What they do is not really RAID. It is not a redundant array of inexpensive disks. It is one Parity drive that allows you to rebuild any of your failed drives. It's a unique way to do RAID, but it's not true RAID, because in true RAID, a file can be written to multiple disks at one time. That's the beauty of RAID. That's where you sometimes can get an increase in your speed. Like if I had a RAID 6 or a RAID 10 array here, they would probably write a lot with a good RAID control. They would write a lot faster than UNRAID does. So UNRAID has to first choose what hard drive it's going to copy your data to, and then it has to go back and create Parity. Now you can do things in UNRAID called a cache drive that'll give you better write times. So I'm sure they've heard it from other people that we're not real happy with your write speeds, so what do we do? But it's not a traditional RAID. Traditional RAID writes the data and the Parity to all drives. It doesn't come back and write a separate Parity drive. And frankly, Synology's hybrid RAID does a much better job than UNRAID does. And it's hard to expand. If I go to expand, instead of using 1 terabyte drives and go to 2 terabyte drives, I first have to expand my Parity drive, replace it, and expand that to the largest drive size it's going to be in your array. So that's a bit of a deal killer for me too. One thing I like about UNRAID over FreeNAS is that UNRAID is written under Linux, and I know Linux. FreeBSD is quite a bit different. It's not that much harder, but I know Linux. I know enough in Linux to get myself out of some deep trouble if I get into it. FreeBSD, I wouldn't know where to start. Now that's a limitation on my own, but I'd like for it to be on Linux. So a plus is it's the UNRAID is not proprietary, so I could, in theory, pull those disks out and move them into any physical machine and read the data off of them, in theory. So I like that, whereas FreeNAS is not the case on FreeNAS. That is the case also on Windows Drive Pool. You can pull the drives out and they're readable in any machine that can read NTFS or the REFS file system, so that's another advantage. There is no clear way on UNRAID to choose BTRFS over XFS, and Linux BTRFS is Linux's version of the file system, the redundant file system, self-healing file system that FreeNAS uses. The name escapes me at the moment of what they call that system. And it's not a complete replacement for the system that FreeNAS uses, but I prefer it to XFS. However, there was no intuitive way to do that. The instructions made it sound like you had to have a cache drive in order to choose the BTRFS file system. I don't know if that's the case or not. I didn't dive deeper into that, but we will when I set up UNRAID again in a virtual machine. We'll take a look at that. And the other thing is UNRAID costs money. You know, we covered that before. So it's not free like FreeNAS is. And there's some other derivations of FreeNAS out there. If you're not a big fan of FreeNAS either, we'll cover those in a future video. Windows Server, I switched back to Windows Server. I kept my RAID 1 array so I could reboot back into Windows, and that's what I've gone back to on this Dell. That was my final decision. And then I set up a drive pool, regular Windows drive pool, using 4 1 terabyte drives so that I have storage for virtual machines. And that's the way that machine's going to stay now. Like I said, we will build a FreeNAS machine on that beige box that I currently have running VMware ESXi, because I just don't use it, and I'd rather put those spare hard drives I have to good use. So, but Windows cost is about it's about $600 for a 5-user version of Windows Server 2016. But then again, you get what you pay for. Now me, I'm on their Windows, the partner program, under Action Pack subscriber, and so I get all these operating systems and copies of Office to use in my business for about $500 a year. So that may be a way you want to go. But ultimately, UNRAID just wasn't a good fit for me. Doesn't mean it won't be for you. And I pointed out some of its shortcomings, and in future episode I'll go over it in some more detail and find other things I don't like about it. Anyway, hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, give us a thumbs up down below if you liked it. Tell us what your experience has been with UNRAID. Have you used it? If so, what am I missing? What are the whiz-bang features? Convince me. You're not going to, but you can try like hell to convince me to use UNRAID. But let us know what your experiences have been, and that way everybody else can get an unbiased opinion, because I'm a little biased. I'm a Windows guy. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate your patronage, and we'll see you on the other side.